Good morning. My name is Caesar Quill. It's 3 a.m. in the morning, but I felt inspired. So let's talk about this topic that you can see over there. Thematic writing has caused our audience. Now, I'm a playwright and a screenwriter, though not a prolific one. But writing has always been something that is important to me. So when I discuss this, it is coming from a point of attacking both myself and I think the trends that I am seeing currently. So let's get into the topic. What do I mean by thematic writing? So in order to understand what I mean, let's quickly point to the opposite of thematic writing. So you have a film like A Quiet Place, which is a character-led story about a family who has to survive a dangerous world. This means that the actions the characters take are what move the story to the next plot point. So, for those who have not seen the film, it's a world where people navigate by producing the least amount of sound possible, or else they'll be attacked by, some creatures that are very sound sensitive. The beauty about films like that is they are what is known as character driven. In other words, if a character, throws a spoon down, they've made an action that immediately has a consequence to it. And so that consequence builds up on it. And now they have to perform a new action, and that has a consequence, and so on and so forth. Thematic writing, while not completely divorced from character storytelling, takes the opposite approach. It starts with a theme it wants to explore first, and then it creates characters that meet that theme, and then it discusses it, and finally arrives at the end with the theme fully explored. So rather than the actions of the characters creating the next plot point, even though they certainly do, otherwise, you don't end up with a story, what thematic writing tends to do is it ensures that whatever actions can be carried out cannot go out of the bubble of the theme being discussed. So they can do actions, of course, they're free, otherwise, the story does not happen, otherwise, conflict does not occur. But whatever actions they take cannot be outside of the theme that is being explored. Thematic writing has an importance. It was and still is a popular Nollywood tool. Many church plays and Christian films use it. My background, I started also writing church plays earlier on in my career. That's where I built up the confidence to actually write full-fledged plays. Community-based theater, indie films, even blockbusters use it. The idea behind the style is to effectively pass a message or explore an important discussion in ways character-led stories wouldn't. Character-led stories have a tendency to have messy, you know, um, not plot lines, but direction, in the sense that a character doesn't always have to agree with with the direction of a certain theme, and they can realistically take a different approach, and the story has to account for that. So the problem is not that it exists, thematic writing, or that it is popular. Obviously, good writing techniques are popular for a reason. The problem is that it is teaching the industry and writers specifically the wrong lessons. Let's get into that. So here's what happens. The writers go for a current topic. This way, the subject matter is immediately relevant and makes it easy for marketing in the process. The idea is to have relatability. So you pick a theme because it is immediately relevant. What do people want to listen to right now? What is the burning topic that we can all discuss right now? And so after that, they write a story to accommodate the topic, and the characters come second as a result. Who makes the most sense to be here? Who is most likely to be the target for the lesson to be learned? And then after that, a story is created and then it disappears. The relevance of the topic that is being discussed eventually fades with time, aging the story and making it hard to consume it in future. So the problem isn't necessarily thematic writing. It is relatability that lacks a longevity plan. It is writing an important piece of human history without considering how such a discussion could be viewed later on. So if you write a story where the theme is too strong for your characters to challenge, your characters become forgettable, and the characters are the lifeline of a story. If the characters are forgotten, the story will be forgotten. Before I get to my example, I'd like to explain just in a little bit what I mean by that. See, the thing is, let's say the story is about crime, and the theme that I'm working with is crime is bad. Let's go with that. Normally, with thematic writing, I can't deviate from that theme too much. Like, whatever story I'm willing to tell, at the end of the day, I have to get back to the idea that crime is bad. But let's say a character of mine has succeeded in committing crime after crime. Let's say they are a drug dealer and they consistently keep selling drugs, and the money they get, they're able to do a lot of things like maybe help take their mom to hospital for like cancer, maybe help their sister like go through studies. A character like that is not going to feel that crime is a bad thing, at least not yet, because the consequences of the theme, the consequences of crime have not gotten to him yet. So I could not end the story reliably with the person in that position saying crime is bad when crime is consistently rewarding them. A lot of stories will cheat their way out of the system by trying to end it quickly and saying, oh, they ended up doing a bad deal and then they were caught by the police. The end, and so crime does not pay. But that's a cheating system. Everyone who is watching that film is like, hey, that does not make sense. That's not something that's likely to happen. But instead, if the story slowly kept building him up until he finally got to a point where he felt invincible and like no one can take them down, no one can take their drug business down. And then they start making very sloppy decisions as a result, because that's what tends to happen. You get an ego, you become rebellious, and you start making sloppy decisions that you would never make earlier on. You're very careful when starting on, but now that you are the big powerhouse, you've gotten rid of all the kingpins, you're the one, you get to make very terrible decisions because you think you can't be held accountable. That is when the story starts chipping down at their new level. Maybe a new guy comes and ensures that they are taken out of the game, and they lose everything that they had, their whole empire, they lose it. That would still end up selling the message of crime does not pay, but not in the way you'd expect, because it has spent seasons basically glorifying crime to some degree. But thematic writing does not allow you to do that. It strictly wants you to find an answer that is neat as fast as possible in a story. Let's get back to our example. I think I've gone too far for that. Think about a series like Friends. Do you people like the series because it was set in the 90s? No, not really. It is because the characters outlived the era in which they were written. Right now, some of their quotes are very memorable, and they're not stuck to the time period in which they were created. That's what ends up with character-driven stories. They always take directions that are unique to them, that no other character, or at least no other character that isn't as similar to them, would make. And as a result, many of their decisions are memorable. Let's continue. Good characters survive obsolescence. I've put 4 points here. The first is they come from writers who challenge their themes. Challenge does not mean your themes are wrong, but that your characters don't always believe what you believe to be true. I may be a writer that does not believe that, a life of drugs. Or let me use the example that I've put over there. That's Dr. House from House MD. His writers most definitely would not advocate for you to live the same life that Dr. House lives in, which is a miserable person that is constantly looking down on people who probably aren't as smart as he is, and is addicted to drugs to be able to maintain his pain. It's not a lifestyle anyone wants to live. But just because something is not a lifestyle you want to live does not mean your character agrees with you. Your character could be coming from a background that ensures that they have a very different system compared to you. When you challenge yourself that way, and you say, I want to write a character that does not believe in the same things I believe, that character outlives you. It becomes something that is not you, and it also becomes something that is not immediately relatable to the audience. But over time, the audience understands, okay, this is why this character is relatable to me. Again, I'll come back to my example of the drug pin just for an instance. A lot of shows are created about people who, do the drugs thing. Was it Narcos? I've not watched it, but I think it's about that. Breaking Bad. Criminals, utter criminals. Like you find things like Peaky Blinders, Sopranos, people who if you met in real life, you would be scared to even talk to. But when you're watching them on the screen, they're relatable to you and they're criminals. Why is that the case? It's because at the end of the day, these people have certain attributes that we admire, that we'd like to have in our lives, but not everything, some of it. I'll come to explain why that is important. Let me just do it right now. The reason why I feel thematic writing, in a sense, can hold you back from challenging your own themes is that you will always be in the element of, if I give the audience reason to believe that this theme can be challenged, then I make muddy waters. I make muddy waters out of my story, which some themes you just can't do that. I'll come to explain that later, but some themes you can't do that, some themes you have to do that. Let me not ramble on and on about that. Let's just continue to the second point. They make stories stronger through struggle. Struggle helps characters arrive at convictions better than solid themes do, because they always know what lies on the other side. A good character, again, we're going to use House again. This is minor spoilers. But in later seasons, he gets to fight his addiction. But that fight against his addiction could not come until he hit rock bottom around the end of season 5 and start of season 6. That journey of progressively getting worse and worse and worse and worse until they finally realize, I can't keep living like this anymore and I need to change. That is something that comes about when your character is driving the story and driving the driving force. That is an advantage. I'm not saying that character-driven stories are inherently better, but an advantage that you do have is that when a character understands where they've come from in terms of development, there are certain decisions they cannot make anymore. And that makes for stronger stories because you have been with them through the thick and thin. But positive character development is not all there is, because the third point is tragic characters live in the minds of audiences. Seeing a character fail can leave a mark on someone, show them how hard humans can fail despite everything you've been through, all available help for them to change and grow. When you see a character fall, I won't go to House because that would be spoilers, but when a character essentially falls and reaches the deepest, darkest point, and they've done so even though people have tried to help them, that really sticks with an audience. Shakespeare is famous for writing tragedies, Romeo and Juliet of which is one of the most famous stories to date. Because of that, there's an effect that characters making the wrong choices can do to an audience, and it really sells the idea of, wow, what could have been. Let's move to the fourth point. Character writing rewards audiences who look for themes. Sometimes a story communicates its themes better when it says nothing about them clearly and let the audience find answers for themselves. This is what one of the, I believe it was the guy who wrote the Incredibles, who was like, the principle of 2 plus 2, which is essentially the writers don't spoon feed the audience everything. You just give them 2, and you give them 2, and you're like, audience, fill in the rest. What do you think that is? And they are the ones who come up with 4, or maybe 3, or 5. That's the beauty of some stories. They don't give you the answer as 4. If you believe 2 plus 2 is 5, you're kind of right, because that's how you've chosen to see the story. A dangerous thing that would happen, and that's why thematic writing is very important, and that's why I don't want to look like I'm demonizing it, is that thematic writing makes it clear to the audience, okay, 2 plus 2 is 4. That's what I want you to get out of this story. Don't get 2 plus 2 is 5. Don't get 2 plus 2 is 6. So if you need to be direct to the audience, of course, go with thematic writing. But in areas where you'd like the audience to arrive at the conclusion and you're even okay with them being wrong at arriving at whatever conclusion you want them to arrive at, character driven stories is the best place to go. Either way, when you allow your audience to find answers for themselves, when you allow characters to get the wrong lessons out of your story, when you allow them to seek wrong answers and find out, the consequences of it, when you challenge yourself to write characters that don't believe what you believe, you end up with characters that survive obsolescence, which is being irrelevant as time goes on. Let's keep going. Why aren't we already doing that? I think you can, from my argument so far, you might be like, you're making sense, but why are we not doing that then? What is the problem? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It is because of the themes we choose to discuss. Think about it. Many of the themes we choose to work with already have a clear antagonist in mind: the corrupt politician, the village elder who is painfully prejudiced, the corporate leader taking advantage of others. There is no room for characters to grow in these stories. You know, as writers, we have to handle these stories with care because actual people suffer from these issues. But that presents a clear problem because now the characters serve the story. They can't ponder over right and wrong because even trying will upset real life victims of these themes. That is the danger we run into. The characters can't grow or evolve because the risks changing that risks changing the real narratives involved in the stories we write. It makes the stories relevant when they are told, but immediately becomes microwave pizza when new narratives in real life form. When you're talking about a theme that is dark or very sensitive, or even something that is, it requires like mature audiences or anything like that, you cannot be able to deviate from themes like that. When you're discussing some topics, I won't, for the sake of this, I won't ponder into it, but you can be able to tell. When certain topics are discussed, you cannot create characters that deviate from the theme because audiences will start asking, okay, what are you teaching us? What are you teaching the true children? What are you saying to the society? And that becomes a problem in and of itself because now the audience is always paying attention to the story from the perspective of what am I learning as opposed to being entertained. Actively learning from something is not wrong. That, again, I want to be clear about that. It's not wrong to actively learn from a story, but stories are not primarily existing for that. Stories primarily exist for entertainment value. That's why most people write. We write for entertainment value, and education comes as a result of it, but not as the primary engine. And so, when certain themes are explored and discussed, we have to be careful as writers, we have to be sensitive as writers. The audience has a lot of feelings getting into it. And because of that, we can't create character driven stories out of that. We have to make it thematic because we end up running a risk of telling certain people that this is okay or this is fine or you can't do this, and that muddies the waters. And that was what I was hoping to discuss. Let's just keep going. Writers are stuck duplicating real life, but life eventually moves on. New experiences that writers get will not be explored because there is another important issue to discuss. You know, it will always be this is important now, this is relevant now, write about this now. But life will move on from that plot point, right? We all know this. Life waits for nobody. And so that slave to real life mentality will mean a lot of relevant stories get released in the moment that will age like milk years later. And brand new writers will not have access to the minds of experienced writers' ideas through interesting characters. They will instead write about the present like it won't become the past. So again, thematic writing is not the issue. The issue is our evolution as storytellers is slow because it is focused on imitating real life rather than shaping it. Art can be and is often a mirror to our community. But you know what mirrors can't do? They can't record history, they only show the present. Thematic writing can make art feel comfortable, telling people what they already know rather than explore what people will think about years from now. It makes us myopic to the future because it overemphasizes the relevance of the present. It makes it feel like some issues that are presently accessible will never get solved or will never evolve from the way it is right now. And the problem with that is future audiences, if they get an opportunity to see this, will look at that product and be like, why were these people looking at it from? This is, by the way, why sometimes you can watch a movie from the past and be like, hey, this is so short-sighted. Did people really think this thing would not change and become this? Obviously, as a writer, you can't predict the future all the time. But what you can't do as a writer is not get so stuck in the present that you think the future would not look different. Or at least not look at the past to be able to see what human psychology has done that they are going to repeat in the future. Because the future is often a mixture of new events plus a lot of mistakes that people will make from not learning from the past. Let's continue. So you're saying to me, I hear you. I hear we have a problem. How do we fix that? Well, I have 3 fixes for you. The first is this. Overcorrection is just as bad as complacency. It is not about ending thematic writing. I want to be clear about that. We still need that. It is about making more character-driven stories. Stories where characters find development first, then we learn from their experiences, whether positive or negative. The second one, the past and future is just as important to learn about. Learning from the past is about ensuring we don't repeat mistakes. Learning from about the future is knowing what can be called the past and still remain relevant. And the third, and I would like to put an asterisk because I think that's the most important, we are not writing about the present. We are never writing about the present. Whatever you write is always going to be in the past. When you keep this in mind, the temptation to be culturally present dies in the face of a simple question. Will this still be fresh in the future? I put an asterisk on that because I think it's important for writers to know we are not writing for an audience of tomorrow. Well, we kind of are, but we are not writing about tomorrow necessarily. What we are writing about is in the past. What I'm writing currently right now is always going to be judged via the past rather than the future. Like it's always going to be a past event. So when I'm writing a story, I'm always thinking about how will this thing be viewed 2 years from now? How will this thing be viewed 5 years from now? If I can't answer that question, then what I have no business writing about the present, because the present is the past waiting to happen, basically. Let's finish that. We can do both. Obviously, we can do both thematic writing and character-driven writing. As long as we know why we are writing, we can make both styles work. We just need a healthy balance of both. So you can do thematic writing. Some issues only have one way of discussing it, and we should keep them as such. We can have character-driven writing, more stories where characters explore their world, even if it isn't the same as ours. I think I'm done. Thank you. Cheers.